Hey there, folks. John here, and this is the False Takes Podcast, a show where we talk about art, film, and the mistakes we all make along the way to creating something new. As always, we have a special guest with us here today. His name is Austin Burnette, and also I have Mr. Doug Miller here, being my co-host, since he knows Austin really well, and he should have some good questions. So, Austin, first I want to start out with a question that we always ask everybody, and nobody knows it's coming until I ask it. And that is, what is the most overrated movie?
Most overrated movie to me, and many people are going to disagree with me, but I don't care. That's why that's overrated to me, is I really don't like The King's Speech. Just not a fan. And it's not so much that it's a bad movie as it beat out The Social Network for the Oscar that year, and I adore The Social Network. So while everybody's talking about what a great movie The King's Speech is and how perfect it is, I'm going, The Social Network is way better. It will hold up for far longer than The King's Speech. And so that to me is just a pebble in my shoe. Even though it has its merits, I can't admit any good to it because I can't stand it for that reason.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people going, no!
And they'd be wrong.
So, Austin, so tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in the industry.
So I am based out of Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I work as a mix really evenly between first AC, a camera operator, and a DP. So I kind of get to do all three. It's a small market. Being able to do all three gets you a lot more jobs. I ultimately want to move more and more of that work to being DP, and I do a good amount of DP work and have a good amount to show at this point. But I'm in the union officially as a first, and end up I am dangerously close to having to re-rate to an operator position because I think I have like 2 days left before they come at me telling me I have to give them more money.
So why don't you tell us who you are and what you do in the industry today?
So when I first graduated, I started DPing because that's kind of what my fellow film students knew me as, and as they got work, I got some work with them, and then got in contact with some other local people and started doing some DP work for them, and that was great. It was fine, but I started realizing my work wasn't getting much better after the first couple years of kind of doing that. It got a little bit better because you're obviously getting more practice, but I really wanted to take a step back and start ACing and try to get on some bigger sets and start learning from some DPs that have, far more industry experience than I do, so that I could kind of start picking their brain and watching and seeing how they do things. And I knew no one's going to hire me to do a big budget project when, I'm fresh out of film school and I don't know that much in the grand scheme of things. So I figured the quickest way to really learn and kind of evolve was to, go, all right, well, let me take a step back. Let me AC, which is something I never did in film school. Let me really learn how to do that well and get in the union and get picked up on some of these bigger shows and start learning from some people that have, a lot more experience and just kind of, steal all their good moves. That's what it's all about. It's just stealing other people's good moves.
Absolutely. And that's how you build your bag of tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Is steal other people's. But we all do it, and so it's not really stealing. It's kind of like, hey, I'm going to take this from you. The person goes, great, because I took it from.
Yeah.
It's all about passing it down. And even though, I know we spent a lot of time together, and you know more now than I do, but even when I was teaching you everything, you still wouldn't do things, even though you knew everything I knew, you still wouldn't do things exactly the same way. The end product wouldn't be the same if you did it or if I did it. It's not
Yeah.
it's not competition. It's not a competitive, oh, he's stealing my trick, so he's going to get better than me. It doesn't work that way. So good on you.
Well, I started getting bored,
Yeah.
and of course, when you're getting paid for something and you're out there, you tend to revert back to what you know is safe, so you can deliver something that's safe. And it just didn't leave much room for extending my knowledge and what the final product could kind of look like. And so even though I tweak things here and there, I was like, you know what, there's other people that know way more than I do, and I need to, watch and see how they do it. And it's only going to make me better. I'm not going to get worse by learning from people better than me. So it just seemed like the quickest way to kind of climb the ladder and get better at this.
Well, right now, I've got a question for you. Right now, what would you consider your strongest point, and what would you consider your weakness?
My weakness, we'll start with that, will definitely be anything post related. So what you can do in color, how color and a lot of that works, I've only barely scratched the surface of that, as well as just some people are so technically minded, they'll just spit out, everything you could possibly know about a camera. And it takes me a while to kind of process that information. I've never been a big computer guy, so when people start talking very technical specs of cameras and things like that, while I understand it, there's a lot I need to know in terms of that. And really anything post related is kind of where I struggle the most, and I'm learning now, but I should have started learning a while ago, because that's where everything is steering.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a little late in the game there. I think my strengths ultimately are in lighting, I would say, which is weird since I didn't come up through G&E, but came up through camera. I would think that I would be a little bit more technically minded than I am lighting minded, but I just really love lighting. And I think that I've got a pretty good eye for it. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm the greatest thing. But I think I've got a pretty good eye for it, not just based on the final product of a lot of stuff I put out, but even when I'm working with other people and I'm working as an AC and I'm working with a DP that's been doing this for a long time, I tend to be able to be a step ahead a lot of times on what the lighting ultimately needs to be to kind of get that look he's going for. So other DPs love that when I work with them too, because they have somebody on their team that, also DPs and kind of knows a little bit, that they can always come back and go, hey, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
So it's made me a bigger hit with getting work with other DPs too,
There's a DP I worked with in Virginia Beach, who I won't name, but he actually on sets used to go, no waiting, 2 DPs, when I would work with him. I was gaffing and he was doing camera. It was a pretty small cruise kind of thing. But when someone's not threatened and they can make a team all the stronger, that's even better. I think your lighting eye is going to actually give you an advantage when it comes to coloring, and the technical stuff is really not hard to learn. I should come down and do a little seminar with you and Ian.
That would be awesome.
Because, sit down, or you guys should come up here and I'll do it up here. But I'll make that
just
offer.
Some sort of seminar. Yeah.
I'll make that offer.
Like I said, I'm just now scratching the surface of that.
Yeah.
Sure.
You got
so let me steer the question away just a little bit for a second. Do you have a specific project that you've worked on? It could be recently, it could be a couple years ago, whatever, that you really loved. And what would be, what do you love about it, and what would be some of the things you could have done better, and what lessons did you learn from it?
So I'm kind of that kind of person that very rarely gets to the end of a project and goes, that is something I love. There's nothing I could do better. So when you say that, I mean, almost every project comes to mind in terms of things that I could kind of improve. But let's pick one that I particularly thought was better than others. That would probably been my Kaytranada music video for "You're the One." Um, I really liked my work on that, but of course, in hindsight, things could have always been better. And it's always for me going to come down to pre-production. And sometimes most times that's not my fault, and it's not going to be most people's fault in low budget land, where a lot of times you're just given scenarios on the fly and it's like, all right, make this look good. It's like, well, I don't know this location. I don't know, the lighting package that we fully have. And so you kind of land and try to figure out on the fly not only what you're going to do, but what obstacles you have to overcome, which is usually something in pre-production you figure out before you get to set. So I watch that video now and I go, I wish I would have simplified some of my lighting setups so that I could have gotten some more footage, because some of it ends up being a little repetitive to me. And when you're working on the current shot, your mindset's always on the current shot and making this shot the best you can. But when you get to the end of a project, if you don't have enough, then that's a problem. And I would have rather. So I mean, this happened a bit on the Kaytranada video. I would say it happened even more so on like the ASAP Ferg music video, where I got some stuff that I absolutely loved, but we didn't get enough footage. And so some of the stuff that was shot without me later as fill-in, I can't stand.
Mm.
And so now every time I show the music video, I go, yeah, there's a lot of this I love, and some of it is I don't at all. And that's because ultimately someone else had to shoot it because we ran out of time on the day. And that ultimately comes down to, I mean, partially my fault. I should have probably been quicker on some setups, but especially in music videos, like, time disappears for the dumbest of circumstances. And it just evaporates. And next thing you know, you're waiting 2 hours on talent because they want to finish their steak in their RV before they come out. It's really hard, particularly with music videos, because you don't have the budget really for pre-production like you would like. And on the day, you just never know what's going to happen. But my takeaway is still going to be things I can do better. Be faster. Don't get so caught up on some minute details that when the big picture is, I need to make this whole product look good, not just what I'm working on now. So that's kind of a big lesson.
So talk to me a little bit then about music video stuff. When you first started out, did you want to do music videos? Was that your thing? And second of all, how does that differ from a narrative environment? Because you've DP'd quite a few things narratively as well. So talk to me a little bit about that. What's that look like?
So my goal was never to do music videos, but they are really where a lot of DPs, I feel like, learn. It's a great learning ground in that you can kind of experiment with things, and it doesn't have to always be grounded in reality. So if you ever want to try something weird with the camera or with your lighting, like, that's the time to do it. So while I didn't seek out to start doing music videos, I'm glad that I did, because it's taught me a lot about the craft in terms of what you can do on a small budget. How do I make this different when I don't really have the money to? So you get a little bit smarter and a little bit faster because you're trying to shoot ultimately 3 days worth of footage in one day. But I mean, it's really different from narrative in that more often than not, your first AD isn't keeping the schedule as tight because they're off running around trying to fix other fires because they didn't have the pre-production they needed either. So with narrative, I just love the structure. I love, okay, you've got 2 hours and ready or not, here we go. And just somebody to really kind of keep things moving along. Whereas in music videos, a lot of times it can be a bit of a free-for-all. And so you end up going 17, 19 hours on a day, trying to get it all in on one. It's just a very different work environment. Usually you have a lot of extras without the crew to necessarily wrangle them all properly. And so they'll be hanging around your camera cart. They'll be hanging around the monitors, trying to take a look. Like, there's just always unnecessary people around everything you're trying to get to.
So how do you get anything done? How do you actually have a productive shoot in that environment?
A crew that knows you well. That is not the time to get a crew that you haven't worked with before. And so I always try to bring out the same people that I've worked with, and it doesn't matter what it costs. I got to find a way to get them out there, even if that means taking a little bit of a cut from me, because I've got to have people that know what to do and how I like to do things without me constantly having to tell them, to kind of keep that process moving when I'm working on other things with the director and putting out fires with the AD and whatever else needs to be done. So that's really the best advice you can have for a music video, is just pick a crew you can trust that is you don't have to babysit. And I've been grateful that my crew, through all the crazy days, still come out with me and help me out, because without them, I would be toast.
So what makes a good crew member then? What makes it the guys that you hire over and over again attractive for you as a DP?
I would say, first off, just our working relationship. I mean, these are oftentimes not just my coworkers, but my friends on and off set. So, we can talk openly, good or bad, about things and kind of spit ideas back and forth. I trust them. I've been working with a lot of these guys for the majority, if not my whole career. So at this point, they just also know what I'm going to want for the most part. They know where I often like my key light coming from. They know that, there's certain aesthetic things that they can kind of get in place, roughed in, without me having to go, oh no, we need a little something there, a little something there. The best crew is always gonna be the one that looks at the monitor and goes, hey, I'm not sure if you've seen this yet, but we should do something over here. I don't mind when people come over and try to do that. I don't consider it stepping on my toes. They ultimately know that eventually, I make the call, but it is just a godsend to have people that get ahead of things for you in a scenario where you're playing catch up on the production end of stuff.
Yeah. So tell me, what was I going to say? So walk me through what a normal day for you would be. So if you were, from call to wrap, I mean, you don't have to spend a ton of time at any one point, but what does it look like for you to walk in as a DP, on one of these music video sets, and then also compare that to the feature work you've done?
So for a music video, oftentimes the first time I'm seeing the location is really seeing it is on the day. I do a lot of music videos up in New York. I do a lot in DC, and budget's usually not there for me to come up several days early to scout it all out. So I got to rely on pictures, or if it's a location that gets locked in last minute, because that always happens on music videos, is things fall through, you got to pick up another location. A lot of times my first time seeing these places are on the day. So I don't know exactly where the best way to load in gear is. I don't necessarily know where my crew is going to run all the power, or what lights I'm going to need through which windows, or what I'm going to need to flag off and kill and start from, the ground up. So usually the first hour of the day is just looking at the location and basically doing what should have been done on a location scout. I don't have my crew take anything out. I'm just like, this is how it is. We're going long. We're getting paid for the long day. So let's take an hour, hour and a half, and just figure out how we're all going to do this before we start anything. So then the ball gets rolling. You get, start getting things in the can. And ultimately, what I've learned about music videos particularly is last minute guest artists will be thrown in. So you thought you were lighting for one person, now you're lighting for two. There will be walking around a cool location and all of a sudden we go, well, wouldn't it be really great if we got a performance here? And it's like, it would be if we weren't already, 5 hours behind. But okay. So we get rolling. Usually lunch, we all eat in silence as we just kind of think about what we're going to do next and how late the day might go. And then the rest of the day is just cranking out everything and every last minute request that pops up. It's just the nature of it. It's the nature of music videos. It's much more different than scripted or even commercials. I love shooting commercials because, you've got 8 shots you got to do for the whole day. And all you got to do is just make those 8 shots look good. Everything's, in a commercial setting, it's like, okay, you've got a 30-second commercial. We don't need to shoot endless amounts of stuff because we already know roughly what this edit's going to look like. So we're not going to, even if something looks cool, we're not going to waste our time going to get it because, more often than not, it's not going to end up in the final product. Also, commercials have the budget to do pre-production, location scouts. So by the time we roll up, it's okay. Call times at 7 a.m. At 7:01, things are already being unloaded, and the first shots are being set up, which just makes for such a easier, more pleasant day, and less stress for your crew. So I always usually tend to inflate rates for me and my crew on music videos because it's going to be a much more difficult day than it will even be for commercials or narrative. So, narrative follows the same kind of structure. You've done your homework, you know what you're walking into, you show up. There's always going to be some sort of private problem solving, but for the most part, you know what you're about to deal with.
That makes good sense. What's the biggest narrative project you've worked on?
As a DP or in general?
In general.
Man.
Well,
I was an electric on Lincoln, but anything that I had like a key role in would probably have been this last film that wrapped last summer called The Gateway. I was the camera operator for that.
Mm-hmm.
That probably would have been the biggest scale in terms of budget.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done a lot kind of in that tier to smaller. But that's probably one of the bigger ones.
You mentioned Lincoln, and I wanted you to talk about that. That's one of the questions I had. You were still in college when you worked on Lincoln.
Yeah, I was going into my senior year, or I was in the middle of my senior year.
I think it was fall.
Yeah. So it was in the fall. That's right. It was right before Christmas because it was pouring down rain
and
as
cold.
we pulled up 4 Rot for a week, a week before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So it was freezing. And
you still want to go. And you still wanted to go into film.
Oh, absolutely. Now, there's nothing else at that point I was going to do.
You were hired as a overhire day player. Is that right?
Yeah, my job on Lincoln essentially was pick up the four rot. At that point, I didn't even know what four rot was because I was still in school, and
We didn't have
so
four rot.
yeah, we didn't have four rot. So in Petersburg, they had ran just miles and miles of this stuff because they turned Petersburg into just one giant, set.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a week, I just wrangled four rot, 100-foot cable, 100-pound cables, wrap them up, sort them, resort them, and do it again every day. I've never had my hands hurt before. That was the first time my hands hurt so bad.
I remember hearing a story from you from that time where you talked about your relationship between you being a day player and the core crew. And tell us a little bit about that. How did you keep on it? That's kind of the big question, because there are people out there that are just starting and they're going to end up thrown into a day player kind of situation. And those are often revolving doors where someone comes in and gets kicked out. So talk about that.
Oh, and I mean, that's how I got the job. Was I got a call from the best boy and said, "Hey, I need somebody who can shut up and work their butt off. And I heard you could do that." And that was my interview. I said, "Yep." He goes, "Great. Be here tomorrow, 7 a.m." Didn't ask previous experience. Didn't ask,
you're going to be hauling
are you still in film
for
school? Yeah. He just said, "Hey, I was told from somebody on my crew that you can work hard and shut up." And I was like, "Yeah, I can do that." They're like, "Cool. See you in the morning." And so sometimes that's all it takes. So when I'm out there, a couple things I learned. One, I'm looking at gear that I've never seen before, not just the four rod, but other things we had to, I was on the rigging crew. So things we had to de-rig and rig, and, there's a lot of stuff I just never put eyes on. And so the thing about this industry is you don't have to know everything as long as you're pleasant and competent. If you're competent, it doesn't mean you necessarily need to know exactly what you're doing, as long as you're smart enough to ask what you're about to do. Competent isn't like I have to know everything about what I'm doing. It's sometimes just having the wisdom to go, I don't know what this is. I should probably ask somebody what to do with it before I try to do something with it. And nobody on a crew, everybody's been new before.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you do that and you just be honest and don't say you know how to do something and then fail at it and they have to redo it, they're going to be cool with you. They don't care if you're new, as long as you'll work hard and ask the right questions and don't pretend to know everything.
Well, and common sense and be safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Safety, always number one thing. If you don't know something, definitely ask somebody, because that could become a major hazard. And that's the thing you're going to get yelled at if you're new. I've never been yelled at on set while I was new for anything that wasn't safety related. It was always, if you ask the question, people are going to give you an answer and be cool about it. They get it. As long as you don't do anything unsafe or anything they're going to have to redo, they typically don't care.
Maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but I thought I remembered a story about the core crew saying to you that they basically got rid of the day players, but they kept you because they didn't have to tell you about doing things more than once.
Yeah, I mean, and once again, that just comes back to I was scared, quite frankly, being on a big set like that the first time. So I asked a lot of questions, and there was nothing that. And then once I got the hang of it, I was able to, I was going, okay, after I roll up all this four rot, they're gonna ask to sort it. So I would just start sorting it before they had to ask me to. And then they kind of upgraded me to, all right, well, you're really good with organizing things. Can you go to the stage and organize our our areas on the stage, because that's something you seem to have a knack for and be quick with. So once again, a lot of that came down to just asking the right questions and then knowing, okay, the thing is everything on film set's really more or less a pattern.
Yeah.
If you put a stand up, you're going to need a sandbag. Put a light up, you're going to need a stinger. Like, once you figured out what all needs to happen, there's no reason someone should have to ask you to do something that's standard.
Yeah.
And the people that get gone quickly, people that they kind of weed out, are the ones that, hey, we do this every time. Why isn't it done? You're wasting our time. You're wasting, the set's time. You should know this by now. This isn't day one. And that's something I've always gotten, like, that's one thing when I have new people that I always kind of drill into them. I'm like, hey, look, just pay attention. You'll know after the first couple hours on set, more or less, if X is done, then it needs to be done every time. So it's not a guessing game.
Yeah. Shifting gears slightly, but not really. I know that your dad runs his own business, and your brother runs his own business.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of grew up in a family of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
How is that an advantage to doing what you're doing now?
So I learned how to lead a team, I feel like, at a very young age, which was very helpful. I've always had good people in my life that had good managerial skills. So that is translated very well to ultimately taking key roles on set. I tend to have a pretty good knack on how to treat a team if I want to keep a good team,
mm-hmm.
and how to work with a team, but it's also how to still lead a team. Because that's, lighting and camera and stuff like that is sometimes the easiest part of being a DP. Sometimes the hardest part is leading the team and making sure not only that you're doing your job right, but everybody else under you is doing their job right, and they have the means to do their job right. Because that's what it comes down to. You're no good if the people under you can't do what they need to do in a timely manner and be efficient. Ultimately, you're never going to get that image you're looking for if everybody under you is capped out.
Mm-hmm.
So really leading a team is something also I've always enjoyed. That's something that I think not everybody necessarily enjoys. Some people really enjoy just being the person who shows up, is kind of told what to do, knocks it out, does a great job with it. But it definitely takes a different set of skills to be the person on top going, okay, here's what we need done from our different teams, and let's all make this happen cohesively.
One of the things about the business, and I know it, it's not like a guaranteed paycheck every 2 weeks.
No.
And you're having to hustle and get work. But I see that kind of plugs into that owning a business and entrepreneurship kind of thing too. So do you think that gave you a leg up to take the risk and be self-employed, run your own business?
I think that's definitely rooted in me a little bit. Now, my business fluctuates much more than theirs does.
Yeah.
But the principles are kind of the same. If you're going to work for yourself, you particularly need to make sure that the product you're putting out is always top notch, because you're only going to be as good as your last job.
Mm-hmm.
And which I think is something.
Customer relationship too.
Service. Yeah, absolutely. I hated, sometimes it is so hard to say you're sorry when you're not, or apologize for something you never did wrong.
Yeah.
But I learned that working at my dad's stores growing up, and it's something that is translated to the film industry, because sometimes swallowing the bullet and just going, hey man, I'm sorry, is, even if it's not your fault, is a whole lot easier than having an hour-long argument that's then going to put everybody's on edge the rest of the day. It's just not worth it. Sometimes the best leaders on a film set that I've ever worked with have been the peacemakers.
Yeah.
That even if it's not their fault, they just go, you know what? That's fine. Let's move on. Let's keep going, because otherwise this is going to drag.
Yeah. Finding blame is usually just a waste of time.
Oh, it's awful. It's such a waste of time, and everybody knows what you're doing.
Yeah. Shifting gears again, because I like keeping you off balance a little bit. You're married.
I am.
You have a family.
Yes.
And I can honestly say, because I know your wife, that you don't deserve her.
It's true.
So how does she deal with, and what do you think are some of the good choices you made in terms of who you married? And what do you think, how does she deal with the mercurial nature of your job and your business, and how much money you've got invested in equipment and blah, blah, blah?
Whew, man, my wife is a saint, especially on several fronts. One being that she understands when a job comes up and we just have to take it. If that's like, that's my paycheck, I've had to cancel, especially in the early days when I wasn't making as much. I had canceled so many vacations because it would be 2 days before we go on a trip and somebody goes, hey, I've got a job worth 10 grand if you come here for the month. And it's like, all right, well, I have to take that, I can't just, we're not in a spot where I can turn down 10 grand for a vacation. So that happened a lot. Also, we probably would have, I can honestly say we would have at this point a very, very large house if I traded in all my film gear.
Mm-hmm.
Because between all the cameras and all the accessories, I mean, we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up in film gear at this point that I'm glad she doesn't see as a waste, but as a tool and a necessity.
Investment.
And an investment in what I do. But she's great with that. But one thing I cannot stress enough is, before anybody gets married in this industry, you need to be together long enough for the person to see what the industry realistically looks like over a couple year period. Me and Chelsea had met in college. And so when I graduated, I was not working at nearly as much as I am now. And so one thing I had said was, hey, I know this is going to suck, but like, we really need to wait to get married for a while, see how this all pans out, because it may not be something you want to be a part of. It's stressful when you don't know if a job's coming or not. It's stressful when you have a job that falls through and you lose all the money you're counting on from that job. It's stressful when you got to go out of town and leave the kid at home, and all of a sudden she's taking care of her for weeks on end by herself. And so I had a lot of friends get married in college and go into the industry, and they all divorced.
Really?
Very quickly. Yes. Lots of friends divorced very quickly as soon as they started getting an idea of what this life actually looks like. So my advice to people is always just hold tight, wait and see if it's something you're both are on board with, because it's very military-esque style of living.
Mm-hmm. I know you know this, that I think this, but you waited too long. She was too good.
We did wait a while.
Yeah. But
we also skipped over very rough patches that a lot of my friends had in their first year or two of marriage.
True.
So that was nice.
Yeah, there you go. That works too. You've got a number of friends now that are happily married and doing okay in the business. So that's kind of fun. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can always get advice from each other and figure out how to do it. And that was even something I had asked other people too before I got married, is, okay, I see you've been doing this for X amount of years. How have you made it work?
Yeah. Yeah. Divorce is rampant in the industry. So,
Sure.
you got to be careful about that. Now, you mentioned equipment. Um, you have a veritable little rental house.
Mhm.
How do you make the decision on when to buy something or when not to buy something? Because you're not a rental house,
No.
but you do have a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I first started buying things just so that I would kind of be a little bit more marketable,
Hmm.
especially in the low tier things. If you can bring out a camera that they don't have to pay a fortune to go rent from a rental house, like you're a savior and you're going to keep getting work, even if you don't know how to use that camera, which is sometimes unfortunate, but the nature of, you know, very low budget filmmaking. But now that I have a pretty good arsenal of different things, I tend to base my decisions in this on knowing somebody's going to pay for it before I buy it. I buy a lot of my gear right before I go onto a feature, and we get the quote from a rental house, and I'm like, well, some of the stuff I've been wanting to buy, and they'll pay if I match this price, they'll pay this much of it off. So maybe I'll go ahead and do that. So I did that with my Preston system and a Mapbox system and all that type of stuff is going, okay, well, I see you're going to rent a Preston system over the course of this shoot for $4,000. Shoot, give me $4,000. I'll buy it and then just rent it to you. And that's what I did with a lot of my gear. And that's how I acquired a lot of that. Was just kind of waiting for somebody to ask for something, not just for a day or two,
Yeah.
but somebody that I would know would pay off a significant portion of it, and then I buy it. It's a really good way to acquire gear, especially on indie projects. Is just going to the UPM and going, hey, I will provide this gear off the list. It's the same stuff you're going to rent, if not better quality. And that's the thing is, people ask me all the time, they want to buy something that's, it may be a good product, but it's not a rental standard. And it's like, that's fine if it's just for you, but if you plan on getting on other stuff, like you need what they're used to renting,
Yeah.
even if it's not your favorite.
Even if it's a name and it's probably overpriced.
And it's all overpriced.
Have you made any regretful decisions in terms of purchasing things?
Fortunately, no, not
Uh,
yet. I did buy a car mount once, that I've literally used only once because that's, I'm not in the grip department.
mhm.
However, it was for a commercial. We needed one last minute, and it pretty much paid for the item itself. So I was like,
You didn't
just go
lose
ahead,
anything.
and I might have lost a couple $100,
Mm.
but
But
who
the client
cares?
was
It
happy.
was yeah, the client was happy, and I was able to get it in on time and all that. So that's really the only thing I think I've ever technically lost money on. Everything else has been great.
I,
I also shop rigorously. I know the
mm,
cheapest deal on everything.
there you go. We'll have to talk later.
Yeah.
I actually have a question. I'm going to interject from
Mhm.
audience real quick, and then we can scooch back to that if we need to. So Grant wants to know. He says he knows you said you got in through the camera department, but how'd you go about starting there? And do you recommend going that way, or would you recommend going through G&E for somebody just starting out?
Let's start with that. I think that 50-50. I've met so many wonderful DPs that came up through G&E, and they're just as good as ones that came up through camera. It's really kind of a pick your flavor because it's very two different types of really. One, I don't think is going to make you a better DP than the other. I think what you're going to do is what job do you like doing better for the 10 years, 15 years you're climbing the ladder through that department. Because it's two very different speeds. G&E, you tend to work your butt off really hard for a period of time, and then while everyone's shooting, you're really not doing much. And camera, you're kind of, it's more of a steady, always on the go pace. And so it really just comes down to what kind of job you prefer. I realized that I preferred camera. I'm very organized. And so as an AC, that was something that the DPs I worked for really loved. It was just all of our stuff was always pristine condition, and everything was labeled. Everything had a place. There was never a bunch of unnecessary crap on the cart they had to dig through or for last minute grabs. So I just found that my skill set ended up being a little bit more useful in camera department than I was at rigging things and setting up, big nets and bounces and all that. I mean, that's a completely different type of skill set and completely different kind of mindset a lot of times. So I don't think one makes you a better DP than the other. It just, what job would you prefer doing on the way up to being a DP?
So you said you bought your own gear to make yourself more marketable early on. Would you say that's how you kind of broke in, or was there some other way that you think was maybe more important that you kind of broke in and started getting work consistently?
I broke in for two reasons. One, I had some film school friends that started getting work, and they brought me out. For new clients, a lot of times a big plus was that I had my own gear. In a small market like mine, where I wasn't terribly interested in moving out to New York or LA, I just realized that owning gear was a very useful calling card. I don't think you necessarily have to do it that way. Obviously, there's most people don't buy their own gear and they do just fine. But for me, I had the opportunity, and that was the best way in for me at the time.
Gotcha. So whatever the situation calls for, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to skin a cat. Everybody's entrance into this business is different. It's so fascinating because, you always start talking with different people and says, oh, how'd you get into this? And, I've met everybody from people that said, well, I literally did construction, and I had a friend go, hey, this pays better. And I walked off the building houses and onto rigging up flags and nets. And I've met other people that, did internships and got in that way. Other people bought gear and just started shooting things themselves and ultimately got good and started getting noticed. There's just no one right way of doing it. It depends on where you are. It depends on what you can throw at it. Sometimes the best way to get into the industry is just by moving out to LA and saying you're available. That's what a lot of people do, and it works great. For me, as somebody who wanted to stay closer to home, it was, all right, well, maybe I'll invest in some gear and make myself a little bit marketable that way and start shooting, get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I've heard a lot of people say over and over again is to just, no matter what, just never stop shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
keep working.
So
one of the kind of piggybacking on this, you talked a little bit about clients and how do you get clients, and what's the key to keeping clients?
Be pleasant to work with, because sometimes things will happen and you just aren't going to be super proud of the product you put out. Every now and then it's just going to happen. You're going to have a bad shoot. Things don't go the right way. You don't have the right gear. Not at the right location. But the key for keeping clients is always just being very understanding and very pleasant to work with, because people a lot of times will rather have somebody who's pleasant and good versus someone who's great and a pain in the butt. especially if we're not talking, Hollywood level things here where the pain in the butt can just be given everything they ever want. So it kind of keeps them at bay. And low budget land, you got to be pleasant. You got to be understanding. You got to be collaborative and go, hey, this is what I want to do. But if that's not what we can do, then let's figure out the best way to do what you want to do.
Kind of building on that, we throw around the word networking a lot.
Yes.
What does networking mean to you, and what's the key to successfully networking?
So networking to me, I think, is actually I am not somebody who puts myself out there. I've got some people who are just hustlers. You put them in any scenario and they're going to find work. My friend Mark Belcher, who I believe you guys had on this here before,
Yep,
is that way. you put that guy in the middle of the ocean, he's going to find a way to get paid from the fishes.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter. I'm not wired that way. So networking for me is a little different. It's going to dinner with the crew after the long day. It's becoming friends with the people you're working with so that the next time a job pops up, you're the first person in their mind. So a good example would be, I've got another friend that I work with a lot, and we've worked on all the same projects, more or less. A lot of times I bring him out as my first if I'm DPing. A lot of times he'll be my second if I'm on the first, and so on and so forth. But I always get the call, and he would always kind of be frustrated, like, why am I not, why aren't they calling me? But I tend to put a lot more time invested in actually hanging out off set with these people, especially on films where you're out of town. And so everybody's going out to dinner after when the day's done. It's really putting in those hours there to getting to connect people, because it's hard to connect with people on set. You've all got a million things to do. You don't really have time to sit around and talk, especially if you're in the camera department. A lot of relationships are built with film people after hours, whether that be drinks, whether that be dinner, whatever. Just going out and hanging out with these people has been my best networking tool. Of course, I keep in touch with the people I work with throughout the year. I'll try to go out to LA a couple times a year and just catch up with people that, I don't get to see all the time. And, I'll text and call different people I've worked with and just kind of check in once in a while. But in an industry that's all word of mouth, I've never gotten a job through a resume. No one's cared what I've done before. They just kind of care what I'm, if I'm available and I'm hardworking now. And so a lot of my networking takes place during, after hours during production.
Gotcha.
So Grant in chat asks, what, for someone who wants to DP or AC or even cam up, would you go to LA, or would you recommend East Coast, or what do you think, from your perspective, is probably the best place to get in from?
At this point, the industry's changed so much. Go wherever you want. If you work hard enough and meet the right people, you're going to get work. It doesn't matter if it's Atlanta, LA, New York, or Virginia. There's enough work out there for all of us. And there's going to be some areas that obviously are smaller markets than others, but it's all ultimately the same. You want to do a job, go to where you want to go, get plugged in. And I will say that if you go to a place like LA or New York, you'll probably work more often, but that also, that's relative. I've got lots of friends in LA that I work just as much, if not more than them, and I make more, and I can have more because I live in Virginia, where it doesn't cost $3,000 for rent. monthly. So it just depends on kind of where you want to be. You can make it work anywhere.
Sure.
I don't think there's any one better place than another. I think that used to be the case, but now with so many other states having good tax incentives, like there's work just about anywhere you go.
So we're going to wrap up here in just a minute, but I did want to throw it out to Doug. Do you have any final questions that you have had being held?
Just the last one I actually have is Virginia's a right to work state. So
Yeah.
to union or not to union? That is the question. You obviously have gone 600. Why 600?
Yes.
Why union?
And first, if you could just explain what the 600 is for people that don't know.
So 600 is the union for camera in general. You can get classified in 600 as a DP, camera operator, DIT, AC, or I think publicist, something kind of random.
May still photo, I think.
Still photos, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
So I struggled with the question of going union or not for a while, but ultimately I decided to go union because I started getting calls to work on union projects. But when they found out I wasn't union, they said, okay, we'll call you back if no one else who is union is available. Because on bigger projects, they're going to have a contract with IATSE, and 600 is the only national union I'm aware of. So 487 will be your grip and electric and, departments like that here in Virginia. But it's something else in LA where grip has their own union, electrics have their own union. But what I always tell people about whether or not they want to go union is, are you losing work because of it? Because if not, it's a very big investment to make, especially for camera. It's about $8,000 to join just as an AC after all the fees and everything. So if it's something where you're doing a lot of non-union work and no one is usually asking you to do union work, it's probably not worth it at that time. Once you start getting calls to do union work and you're not getting picked up on the job because they have to call someone who's union first, that's usually the time to switch over. But I don't ever recommend somebody just getting out of school and trying to join for two reasons. One, once you're in the union, especially in the camera union where it's so hard to get in initially to begin with, you either have to have 100 days of work on non-union projects or 30 days of work on a union project, plus the $8,000 really as a starting point. You're probably not going to be ready for those kinds of jobs right out of film school, regardless. Even if you're really good, probably need a little more time in the professional world before you get to the point where you go, okay, I can handle whatever they're going to throw at me on union jobs. Because even now, I'll do union work where I'll be thrown something that I've never even seen before. Some new tool out of LA that everyone else seems to have training on that I don't. It's definitely taking a step up. So you need to be pretty confident that you can do your job just as good as anyone else before you take that step. Otherwise, you'll end up on a job that you just end up tanking on, and it was too much, and you just don't have all the right skill sets yet to keep up with everybody else. Because sometimes it's not even just knowing what to do, but how fast and how efficiently you can do it. And that takes time, it takes skill. And it's something that a lot of times right out of film school, you're just not ready for. I actually had a camera PA once on a movie who was still in school, but the whole time talked about how he always was firsting projects at school, and that he's a first AC, he's a first AC, he's a first AC, and now we're on a union feature, and like he was so wrapped up in what he thought he knew that he tanked as a camera PA, and just couldn't keep up with what we were asking him to do. The most basic of things on a union job that may be outside the wheelhouse on, a student film. But I see that happen a lot in terms of people thinking they know more than they do, and that's an incredibly dangerous thing. In this industry, you really got to go in with the mindset of constantly being willing to learn. The best people I work with, the best ACs, the best DPs, the best camera operators are always going on set and going, well, that was cool. I learned something new today. I worked not too long ago with a very well-established first AC out of New York. And even on that, I had some things that he had never seen before, some different tools I had brought on set for rigging, different camera gear, and some different ways of doing things. And he's like, man, I'm going to go buy me some of this. This would be super helpful. And, it became a new thing in his bag of tricks, and he's been doing it far longer than me. But that kind of mentality of always going, I'm going to learn something new today, is incredibly important. And it's when you show up out of film school and you think you've done a lot of good work, and then you show up on a professional show and tell everybody how big and how good you are, and then you learn nothing and you just tank, that really does not look good on you, and you won't be working again for a while.
All right. Well, so Austin, do you have anything that you're currently, like, personal projects or anything you're working on right now?
So I did before quarantine and everything hit and everything got kind of pushed back or canceled. So I had a few things I was trying to do this summer that probably won't happen now. So what I've been kind of refocusing my energy on is watching a lot of masterclasses and training videos and getting certified on different pieces of equipment, things that I don't really have much time to do when I'm working. But I'm like,
Sure.
this would be really good to, be certified on, or this would be really good to learn. And so, especially now with all the resources that are out there where everybody's doing, some sort of class online where you can just kind of, it's really good to sit back and watch those. Some are basic and you'll know everything, but they're still good to kind of refresh your memory on basics. Others will be more advanced and you'll learn something new. So every day I've tried to spend a couple hours on my computer watching something new and learning something. And so right now that's my project, is despite not being able to shoot, coming out of quarantine, knowing more and being better.
Cool. Well, if folks want to find you on online, where can they find you?
So I would say follow me on Instagram, Burnette DP.
And I'll put that in the description.
And that's usually where I post. I usually post a lot of my, different stills and things like that, on top of pictures of my adorable baby. So you get
she is adorable.
Yeah. So you can follow me there. And if I don't really have a website right now, I finally took the time to really get a good reel cut together. That took me long enough. Now I'm working on a website, but it is not launched yet. But I also have an IMDb that has, everything listed. Just search Austin Burnette in IMDb and I pop up, and
which is in the description of the video now already. So
awesome. So those are really the best places to find me until I get my act together and get a good website.
Cool. All right. Well, do you have anything you want to add here at the end before we wrap up?
Anyone that has questions, follow me on Instagram, ask me, send me a message. I don't mind answering whatever questions. not too big to talk to. And one of the great things now with social media is even people that are really big, you can talk to. I have multiple time asked questions from very, very well-established DPs on Instagram about things they've posted, and more often than not, they've always responded, and which is pretty cool. So
Yeah.
if you ask me a question, I'm certainly not going to ignore it.
Great. All right. Well, Austin, thank you so much for joining us. This was super fun, super helpful.
Sure. Thank you.
And Doug, thank you for being my co-host, as always. So we will be back again next week. Again, not sure the exact time yet. Depends on the availability of our guests. So keep an eye on our Twitter. That link is down in the description below. Also, you can listen to episodes on Spotify. This one will be up on Friday. We release those on Fridays after I have a chance to edit things and make them sound all nice and good. So make sure you keep an eye on the Twitter for when our next recording is going to be, if you're interested. It should be great. So this has been The False Takes, a show about art and film and the mistakes we all make along the path to creating something new. Thank you guys for watching. I've been John, and we'll see you next time.